Okay, guys.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. As we stream in, we'll probably give folks another minute or so, and then we're going to get going. It's great to see you all. I apologize. I'm just re-windowing here so I can see you all. I always say that, then nobody ever puts their camera on. I love it. It's okay. You can leave your camera off. It's okay. I was just making a joke. Perfectly fine. So people are streaming in wherever you're calling from today. Welcome, whatever time zone you're in. Welcome. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us, especially if you're on the East Coast. Good evening, good afternoon if you're anywhere else. I see we have some sunny places, so I guess that's a good thing.
Clearly not the Northeast because it is
It's,
dark
it's not the
outside.
Northeast. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, I think we're good to start. What do you guys think? Sounds good. Okay, so welcome to our webinar. This is being recorded, and Randy, is this going to be distributed later? How does that work?
Yes, so we will get it on the website.
Okay, fantastic. All right. No, that's great. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome my colleagues, my guests for here, and my really good friends, Dr. Anya Goldina, Dr. Lauren Sloan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. John Wisco, and I'm really excited to have this panel together. We're going to go through essentially what's going to be a tip sheet for you, and we would love to have your feedback later. By the way, Randy, are they going to have a chance to give us feedback, hopefully?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. We'd love to have your feedback to know if this is something that you would like us to do at the annual meeting as workshops and focus on any specific things. But the purpose for tonight is to give you a survey, an overview of active listening and inclusive feedback conversation skills. And the major point of this webinar is to give really high level things for you to think about when we talk about those feedback spaces and skills that would be really helpful for you. So tonight we're going to talk about four primary things. The first is to recognize cognitive, emotional, and behavioral active listening skills that will help learners feel included. We're going to practice some skills of grounding and monitoring emotions, acknowledging benevolent intent, asking questions and gathering data, and reading and conveying nonverbal cues, excuse me, I can't speak, cues in the analysis of cases. And then we're going to talk about some barriers to receiving feedback. We call them truth, relationship, and identity barriers, and the things that you can use to help students work through those barriers. We never really talk about having students overcome barriers. I don't think that ever really happens, but being able to recognize and work through those challenges and sometimes turn them into strengths as they progress in their careers is what we'll give you some tips on how to start that. So we're going to utilize conversational tools of appreciation, coaching, evaluation, trust, optimism, respect, intentionality, care, and growth mindset that will help them improve in their productivity. Okay, so we're going to start off with some cases, and so I'm going to turn the time over to Anya, who's going to talk about that.
Sure.
Anya, just let me know when you want to go forward.
Absolutely. So the cases you're going to see are just examples of some of the things that I have often encountered in my own classrooms and just sort of a brief introduction. I teach anatomy and physiology to pre-health majors, but I also teach advanced anatomy and I also teach anatomy for graduate students in the PA program. I can tell you I've seen the cases you're going to see in all levels of the students we've talked about. So for example, very often for students taking A&P with us, they're in the OT program. If they don't pass this course, they cannot move on in their program. So if they have failed, they're retaking the course. And so there's a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety that comes with being able to pass the course. Go ahead with the next one, please. Another thing that I often encounter is students are not really, they want to get good grades, but they're really not, are not so much interested in learning the content, right? They're more interested in the point value because ultimately it's the point value and the grade that is going to be seen on their transcripts. So they're very short-sighted in terms of why they're studying the content. And when we're talking about improving and improving their knowledge, in their mind, they need to improve just to get a better grade, not necessarily to improve their understanding of the material and its usefulness later on in their career path. Go ahead for the next one. Okay. Um, this one allows anxiety of failure to override learning the material. So this is something we often see with students that, especially ones that are retaking the class, and they're coming in already sort of feeling defeated. And they're also incredibly scared of now passing because in their mind, that's the end of their world, right? And if they don't pass, they don't get to continue. And now they will never become whatever it is that they've set out in their mind to do. And what are they going to tell their parents? So that anxiety that comes along with just not being able to pass sometimes prevents them from being able to retain any material or to actually focus on learning the material in the first place. And the last one is, I think, or two maybe, yeah, we have
Two
also
more.
students, yeah, two more. Another thing that we have, or another things that I've encountered, is that students might have some sort of a reading comprehension problem. But what I'm seeing more and more in my classes is students do not read, right? They very rarely read for fun. They have a hard time focusing on being able to read a whole chapter or even a full page without being overwhelmed, especially if we are now using e-text, so they're reading on a screen. They have a very hard time being able to sit through and reading a full chapter. They don't have time. They have a lot of competing things happening at the same time and a lot of commitments. And they might also have some sort of problems with ADHD, any other sort of disabilities that might alter their ability to understand the content. Plus, English might not be their first language. So just wrapping that up together makes it especially difficult to read the chapters that we are teaching that have multiple, like 20 pages per chapter, and you have multiple chapters per unit. Go ahead with one more, please. And then you have the other part that I find is that students are sort of they're great socially, so they connect very easily with their peers and their instructor, but they have a very difficult time actually focusing on why they're in this class, right? So they appear incredibly extroverted, they get along with everyone, but their attention is not in the right place. And so ultimately they are not able to focus on the content and for various reasons, and some of those reasons could be listed in the cases you see here, and that makes it very difficult to actually complete an exam. One of the things I want to mention here is the cases you're seeing are just examples, but they're not mutually exclusive. So any one student can experience multiple of these in different patterns in different contexts, and you have to deal with that, or we all have to find a way to deal with that. Okay, thank you, John.
Great. Thanks, Anya. So, where do you start? Um, how do we work with students that come from different backgrounds, have different challenges, have different goals and dreams? The first thing that we recommend in our faculty development is develop good listening skills. Um, it's also one of the first ways in which you can be perceived and known as someone who cares and is an inclusive instructor. So I'm going to turn the time over to Lauren, who I've asked to talk about how she um, how she exercises her listening skills and helps her students feel included. Lauren?
So I start on the first day, right? I teach a lot of first year students, and especially, in August, September, they're brand new, right? Deer in headlights. And so on the very first day, and many of you may do this as well, at least it's common in my institution, is we give the first day questionnaire. And in that, John, I guess if you want to, there's a lot of questions on here. So the first thing is, what is your name in the grade book? And what would you like to be called? And that also can indicate, hey, I see you, I hear you. Um, right? Because sometimes they go by their middle name. Sometimes they prefer to be called Mike if their full name is Michael. And then write it out as it sounds, because as you know, and we may have students from diverse backgrounds and they may not be familiar names. to all of us. And so I asked them to write it out. And then John, the next one. And then I asked their pronouns. Because, and this is, I don't ever take attendance on the first day, like audibly. I tell them they have to do this survey. This is how I kind of take attendance because you don't know where a student is at. And their name that's in the grade book may not actually align with what their preferred name is. Though this semester, students on our campus were able to fill out their preferred names and it changed in our system. So I was able to have a lot more of that on the first day. But their name was in the grade book, what they prefer called, and their pronouns. And so I find this is really important. And I've had students thank me in the past for asking this because they feel seen. John, the next one. So then I ask, what semester are they? So do I know if they're in their first semester, right? That they may not be familiar with all the resources necessary in college, or are they at the end of their time here at the institution? And I teach students that are mostly in 2-year programs, so they may say third or fourth semester. Okay, next one. Big one on my campus, are they a first generation college student? Because we know a lot of students, and they don't necessarily know what that means, so I have to explain it. But we know that they don't necessarily have the same knowledge of resources that a student would have if one of their parents or close family members had gone to college. So for me, these things kind of start to set up where might I know I need to lean and understand a student where they're needs some extra help. Next one. What their anticipated major is. While this semester I was teaching a biology for non-majors. Sometimes I get ones that want to go into nursing or veterinary science, or sometimes I have a welding student this semester, and I have criminal justice, and I have HVAC, so he's into plumbing, right? So I do have a wide variety, and then I know what examples maybe to bring into the classroom later in the semester, which they can relate to in their own lives. Next one. Right. What are their concerns and anxieties about life right now? As I do have a lot of students from New York City, and we have a very large population that is African American or Latino on my campus. There are a lot of other concerns in their lives at this point in time, and it is from housing insecurity to food insecurity, and families move and other things that may be going on. So sometimes I see where these anxieties are, which may be taking them away from a focus in a classroom. And that is really important because, we all want our students to be successful, but sometimes those family things at home can really pull on them away from their success. Next one. All right. And then not just about life, but what are their anxieties about college, right? So at the beginning in August, you see missing my family, missing my pets, making friends, right? Those are a lot of things that I do see because this isn't their first, week. They've been on campus after our welcome week. They may be here about a week or so. So they're still settling in. Next one. What are your concerns and anxieties about this class, right? As I'm teaching a non-majors class right now, they go biology, science, I don't like it, I don't do well, right? So, okay, how do I now work with them or try and say, hey, like I'm going to try and relate this to your own life and why it's important, right? So I find that finding their anxieties from the bigger scale now to the smaller scale of class can really help kind of navigate where a student is at. Next one. And then let's say, what are they looking forward to, right? Like we talk about their concerns, but what are they looking forward to? Many of them say the labs, the hands-on experience, right? Because they don't like sitting still for very long. Next one. And then in the past, sometimes I ask this, what has a past instructor done, either in high school or college to help you learn and be successful in the classroom? And so you get things, they work with me one-on-one, or, they help me with this, or they help with that, or they answer all my questions, or a lot of things that I commonly get. Next one. And then I ask what didn't work from a past instructor, because I think that sometimes is more telling. So you can kind of navigate or say, hey, what are we looking at here? And this is how, you can be successful, or how this course is going to be different. All right, next one. And then what should I know about you that can help me increase your success in the course? So many of them have use access inequities for extra time, or they'll say I have an IEP, and so then I'll touch base. Have you gone to the office and make sure it's on file and set this up? Because they don't realize what they may need to do to use those services in college, especially if they're in their first semester, especially if they're first generation, they don't know. And so I've definitely worked with students to say, hey, and I've walked them over. Let's go make sure you set up an appointment to make sure you get what you need. And then the best way to learn, they say hands-on. And then, in my intro, I always give a few fun facts about myself. And depending on what facts I give, their fun facts usually parallel. If I talk about pets or sports, they tell me about their pets and their sports too. I did have a student tell me once NA, and I'm like, non-applicable. No, everyone has a fun fact about themselves, right? Like there's something, right? Like it's a way I can try and connect with them, and it may not be me connecting with them in the first week, but maybe when I see them in lab, hey, hey, I like your nails. You said you like to do nails, you like to do hair. And then all of a sudden they feel like you actually read my paper. You actually read this about me, and then you establish a connection. And so I find that while I don't necessarily ask all of these every semester, I ask most of these every semester. And it sort of breaks that ice for me to get to know them instead of being this person in the front of the room who they're expecting to learn from. Now I get to know a little bit about them, even if they're not the most forward and participating in the classroom. So this is
Well,
what
wait,
I
you
do
can't
on the first day.
you can't talk about a fun fact and not tell us a fun fact about you right now.
Well, although I don't work at Penn State, I am a Penn Stater through and through, undergrad and grad school. We will not talk about their football program this semester. We won't go there. It's disheartening. Um, but I didn't go for the sports. I went for the education and proud of it, right? I still bleed blue and white. So I talk about sports. I talk about I have pets. I have 6 cats at home. 3 of them are feral that we're trying to domesticate, so those are some things that, about me.
Thank you very much. All right. I can't remember. Were you going to go over these slides, or you want me to cover these?
You can go through them.
Great. Okay. So there are 3 major categories of listening skills that we'd like to cover. And we're not going to cover these in great detail. I'm just going to highlight what the skills are. Happy to entertain questions later about these, but any one of these skills in any combination can help us become better instructors. The first is pay full attention to what is going on with your students and or student, and focus on what they are saying. When you are in a feedback space, and I'm defining a feedback space as an opportunity where you can either give them verbal feedback, give them written feedback, or give them assessment. Assessments are feedback. And when students are in class, they're interested in performing well. They want to know from you, hey, how can I do this better? What can I do? Um, you probably heard the question, hey, Dr. Wisco, what do I need to know to do well on the exam in your course? Right? I can see you're nodding, right? That is a symptom that you have not given them enough feedback as they've gone through the course. And I've learned that over time. I used to be really offended by that statement, and I've learned over the years that wait, they just want more feedback from me, and so pay attention to what they need. Process the information of what they're talking about, mentally focus on them. Here is a tough one for those of us who are experts. Withhold judgment. I was just joking. I was joking. I was just coaching. There we go. I was just coaching a colleague of mine who's going to run her first feedback session with her students. And she admitted to me that one of the hardest things that she was going to have to deal with was that people were going to criticize the love and that she poured into her course. And I said, I understand that, but they just want to help you. So try to distance yourself from that a little bit and try to withhold judgment of what they're trying to say, because they just want to help you. They might not be the best trained at how to express that, but they do have good intents. Minimize your internal monologue. Concentrate on listening to them as they want to be heard. So these are some cognitive skills. Some emotional skills: remain open-minded, stay calm, and stay open. This is related to my colleague's comment about already feeling threatened that she was going to get ripped apart. And I said, you're not going to get ripped apart. You're going to get lots of great comments and some that you're going to have to improve on. Just stay calm and let them come, and then you can digest them later. Cultivate empathy, try to understand not just the physical state or the psychological state, but also the emotional state of the person that you're speaking of. Lauren really nicely outlined how students are stressed out. Almost all of her points on listening were trying to minimize the stress of the students. And so try to empathize with them and realize that they're going through something difficult. Manage your reactions. I'm not saying be stone faced, but try to temper your reactions. The better way to think about this is try not to be reactive, and you'll understand where that comes in later as we're talking here. Um, have a genuine motivation to understand your students. This, by the way, all of these refer to colleagues as well. If you're in a feedback space with colleagues, all of these apply. Um, I like to ask questions to make sure that I understand what the other person is trying to tell me. Part of my listening skill is to repeat what they have to say, and then we know we're always on the same page. So that takes us to some behavioral skills. Show engagement, nod, uh, look at them eye to eye. Um, Provide verbal cues, affirmations. You don't have to say I see or aha a lot, because then that can get really annoying, but at least acknowledge that you're engaged in the conversation in some way. Here's what I was mentioning earlier, reiterating what I've heard in my own words, or asking questions to clarify what's been said. And this one is really hard for most of us. So Lauren and I were talking about type A people earlier. It's really hard for us to sit there and be silent. It actually just conjures up this really difficult feeling. But that moment of silence is an opportunity for both or all people's brains to try to figure out and digest what's going on in that feedback space. Okay, so those are some skills for listening, and those direct us to really the crux of the matter when you're in a feedback space. Whether it is invited or whether it is in the moment, feedback can be really stressful. And so um, keep that in mind. And so we are trying to recognize that our students have a benevolent intent to do well. Even when they ask you questions like, what do I need to know for the exam, right? That can be really off-putting for many of us, but they really just want to know, what can I do? So I want to take a step back here. And then as we go through these, we're going to interlace with the cases that Anya brought up. I want to take a step back and talk about some cognitive psychology. How many of you have heard of Daniel Kahneman and this book, Thinking Fast and Slow? You can raise your hand. No? Okay. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. That said, it is very heavy on the cognitive psychobabble. So, in fact, here is Daniel Kahneman, and I'll talk about this quote in a second. So, he won the Nobel Prize in economics. He's a psychologist by training, and his work really transformed how organizational thinkers and managers work with personnel. The reason why this book is so transformative is because it forms the basis for a lot of the pop psychology books that we read. So if Daniel Kahneman's a little too heavy, the person you should read is anything by Brene Brown. Brene Brown, her principles are based off of what I'm going to teach you in just a second, right? And one of the things that Daniel Kahneman said is that, I love this quote, the confidence people have in their beliefs is not a measure of the quality of the evidence, but of the coherence of the mind that the mind has managed to construct. In other words, we have biases whenever we are going through information, and we have to acknowledge that. We should acknowledge that we have some sort of bias. As you know, if I'm an instructor, I have a bias that my course is the best thing that I've ever made, right? That's a bias, right? If you look at your syllabus, it is a reflection of who you are as a person, and it may or may not understand where your students themselves are coming from, which is why I loved Lauren Sled so much. So what does this have to do with anything? Daniel Kahneman talked about what's called the dual processing theory, or system one or system two. And this is a neurobiological phenomenon. It's a neuropsychological phenomenon, but your brain pretty much acts behaviorally in either of these two systems at any one moment. So what are they? Well, system one is a fast system. System two is slow. It's methodical. System one is unconscious. System two is you're in the moment. You're conscious. You know what's going on. System one is everyday decisions. System two is you've got to slow down and think about things that are complex. System 1, because it's reactive, can be error prone, versus system 2 is very reliable because you're taking in data and doing something with it. System 1 is automatic and system 2 is effortful. All right, and so we do have brain regions that mediate these functions. I could talk about this slide for an entire hour. I will spare you the grief. But what that means is that these two systems, if you're in one of these two systems at any one moment, then that actually affects how you interact in a feedback space. These two systems are influenced by how we perceive the world, our experiences, our expectations, our observations, how we select data, our beliefs, personal or otherwise, our assumptions, our cognitive distortions, our implicit biases. All of these go into how we perceive the world. And when we feel threatened or stressed, we go into system 1. We become reactive. We go into the state where we will do anything in the world to save face and to make sure that we feel safe. This isn't just your students, this is you too, right? And then when we're in a system 2 paradigm, we're willing to hear data. We're willing to work with things. We're willing to work with other people. We want to have our students and ourselves in a system 2 frame of mind. And when we go into a feedback space, to train our system 1 when we need to react quickly. A good example might be you learn how to drive methodically, right? And you made the mistakes you needed to make in a safe environment so that when you're in a situation where you might be in an accident, your system 1, which is reactive, knows what to do correctly, right? That is what we're trying to do here in feedback spaces. So there's some things we have to keep in mind. We can extend this to the human operating system. So if you get nothing else from the next 2 slides, this is the first thing that you should pay attention to. This is the only thing you should pay attention to if you get nothing else. People want to win. They don't want to lose. They want to feel like they're going to go into a situation and come out of a situation, going in knowing that they can improve and coming out knowing that something has benefited them in some way. This is a system 1 governing value. In other words, when students are stressed, when colleagues are stressed, they don't want to feel like they're being called out. And so other governing values that are system 1, that people want to maintain control, they want to avoid embarrassment, they want to always appear rational. So in order to do that, they're very introspective. They're not willing to listen to other data, or they don't want their emotions to arise. They don't want to be exposed, right? We've all experienced this in one way or another, in one context or another. The other human operating system is our model 2. This is a system 2 governing value. We win together. I may not have all the data, but I'm going to figure out what to do with it. It's okay to be wrong, and together we are smarter. And this is a system where we're taking in information, doing something with it, and trying to become better at what we're doing. For those of you who have students that hate small groups, it's because they always seem to be in system 1 during that small group. For those of you who have students that love small groups, they tend to be more in a system 2. And so, how can we get those students to be over here on the right side and not on the left side? All right. So this slide just basically gives some examples. I'm not going to go over it, which, by the way, if you want access to our slides, just let us know. We're more than happy to share the slides so you don't have to furiously keep writing. But again, please pay attention to this concept that everybody does not want to feel like they're losing when they're coming out of a feedback situation. Even if it's an emergent thing, like you have to tell somebody you did something incorrectly, there's ways to listen and to provide feedback that safely tells somebody that they did something wrong and need to correct, and then they can do it better next time. I had a baseball coach that would yell at me all the time. It was very stressful. I learned a lot, but I can still remember the stress. I don't remember a lot of the knowledge. I just remember the stress part. We've all been through that. And I've had mentors and teachers that have taught me in system 2, where they've methodically worked with me to understand what I needed to correct. Okay, so keeping in mind that people are in stressful situations, there are certain barriers that are general to everybody that where students have to overcome these barriers in order to really receive the productive feedback that they need and to be able to act on the feedback. So we want feedback to be a collaborative process, so we have to overcome the following barriers. There's a truth barrier, and when I say a truth barrier, not that um, there isn't truth, it's that how we perceive the truth through the filters that we have may not be true. So we have to work through that. There is the relationship barrier, and that is the student's actual relationship with you. What I love about Lauren's slide and what I love about the cases that Anya brought up is a lot of those are relationship related, right? Where if the student does not feel heard or does not feel understood or does not even feel like they belong, then anything you say to them is going to go in one ear and right out the other, because you have not established a professional education relationship with them where both of you are open to feedback, because they're giving you feedback as well. Their feedback to you that things aren't going well is they are stressed out and they want to know what's on the exam. That's their feedback to you. And then there's the identity feedback. This is our identity obstacle. This is a really hard one to fix. I would say in my role as co-director of our preclinical curriculum, I work with students the most on this. I like to say that I'm always trying to help students find their mojo so that they can give me the best of their performance that they can. Okay. Anya, I think you were going to interject here at some point. Oh, okay, at the end of this part. Okay, very good. Okay, so tool number one to help with the truth problem. First of all, we have to know what it is. And this is when someone who's stressed out, someone who's in a system one frame of mind is reacting to the substance of the message, and they perceive the message to be inaccurate, unhelpful, or unfair. And they might even react by saying, no, that's wrong. No, I didn't do that. Or I didn't have the full picture. Or you didn't give me the clear objectives. I didn't know what I had to do with the assignment. These are truth barriers, right? It's the perception of what they believe is true. By the way, it's not the perception of what you believe is true. So you have to keep in mind that you're trying to be as empathetic as possible. And so we give 3 different types of feedback that can overcome these barriers. And you can use any combination of these. Statements of appreciation. Thank you very much for for coming in today and for tackling a really difficult problem. Coaching feedback where, okay, this might be more skills related. You didn't do this quite right. Let me show you how to do it. And then evaluation. I told you earlier that assessments are feedback. So my students love, not just my students, but every students love lots of formative feedback because they want to be able to give you the summative feedback, not just for the grade, but for you. They want to perform for you. And the grade just just tells them how they did. They don't really care about the grade. They want to impress you. Okay, so for appreciation, we give them thanks, support, and acknowledgement. For coaching, we give them advice and guidance. And for evaluation, of course, we give them a grade or we give them feedback, formative feedback on what they did. So as I said, we can combine all 3 of these. So we wanted to just go through some of these cases and see how we could do these 3 things. All right, Anya, I'll just expose all of these. Do you want
Yep.
me to go to the next slide?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I just want to also tackle here is that part of the appreciation part, I think appreciation starts from the beginning, right? I think appreciation starts with questions like Lauren asked in the beginning of class, where she tries to get to know every student. That's where students understand that they're being seen and they're individuals. They're not just sort of numbers in a classroom. And you start to build that relationship where they are recognizing that you as a faculty member are interested in them as individuals, and that you recognize that they're coming in with very different backgrounds and that you're interested in learning about those backgrounds. When she asks excuse me, when she asks questions like, what are you excited about in this course, as an opportunity to bring that up later, that shows them that she's willing to make adjustments within her course to target their interests and to try to work with them as they're learning these things. All of that sort of connects to that appreciation that then you can then use and continue building and growing as you're going through through the semester. And then you become a sort of a source of trust, a trusting person. They can trust you as a benevolent individual who really wants to actually teach them something, as opposed to serving as a barrier to their dreams and goals.
Can
So,
I
for
add a quick
example,
comment,
yeah,
Anya? And then maybe
Yeah,
Lauren
please.
can comment on this as well. I have
Mm.
found that students who are underserved, particularly people of color, always feel like people are against them. They never feel appreciated. And that's one thing that I've worked with my underserved students is helping them feel appreciated. You will be absolutely floored at how much they love that because they haven't gotten that enough in their lives.
I would agree with that. I have a lot of students when I tell them you can do this and kind of give them that vote of confidence because they've said no one's ever said that to me before, even from their own family members have told them, why do you want to do that? You can't do that. So the minute I start to say to them, you can do this, I see the positive, like you're getting there, like you made great strides. All of a sudden that anxiety, you see those layers just like disappear and they start to believe in themselves a bit more. And the more you repeat it and show them that, it really is a game changer.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry to interrupt, Rania. Go on.
Not at all. I completely agree with that. I think in that way we also when I think about what we do for a living, I think we have the best jobs there is out there. And that is because our job is to see potential in our students. Our job is to see the positive and help them recognize that. And I think that ultimately is what it comes down to. They need to see that. Right. And so if you have, for example, if you have, for example, a student is not willing to discuss room for improvement and focuses more on points needed to pass rather than understanding the course content, very often that is because they are having a hard time taking ownership of what is happening, of their own learning, right? They're trying to figure out how do I just jump over across those barriers because I need to get that stupid A so I can move on. And I think that's where you can come in and coach them and you could teach them to appreciate the material and to appreciate the process. So very often I have conversations with my students where I tell them like your grade is irrelevant. I know it's important for graduation, but you're significantly more than just a letter grade. And your value is not just in a letter grade. And they say that that's not how they're taught. From the beginning, as soon as grades come up, that's the only thing that they value, and that's the only way that they're evaluating themselves. So if when we come in and we start saying, this is more than that, this is not about the grade, this is about you learning, this is about me seeing what you can contribute by learning this material, all of that changes the dynamic that you have in the classroom and it changes the relationship that you have with that student. So for a student who's not willing to discuss room for improvement, very often there's a lot of underlying issues that are preventing them from being able to actually, very often it's sort of a question, their own question of competency and their inability to believe that they might be able to learn this material. Um, So also a student might be having a reading comprehension problem, and sometimes those students might not recognize that. They might say that they're not science people, right? They might say they do not have the time to read the textbook, and therefore there's no way that they can pass a course. And that's when you can understand that and you start learning and you start figuring out, okay, well, how do we work with this? And that could be reading comprehension problem. That could be ADHD. And we say, well, once you understand what the issue is, right? And they don't often know that, you could start working on strategies of how to fix that. And that becomes one of the, right? One of the things we talked about is how do we actually listen? Because for me, I really I want to fix everything right away. Right? So if you come in and you get tell me a problem, I can fix it. It's not true. I can't fix it, right? I cannot fix a problem if I don't really understand where that problem is coming from. And so for me, one of the things that I have had to learn is how to actually sit down and learn how to ask questions and then be quiet and wait for the student to give me the answers. When
There's that
students come in
silence
and
thing.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's the silence thing, right? And if the student comes in and say, how do I study? And I used to be very quick and say, well, here, I have a whole list of how you study. And then I was like, hold on a second, why don't you tell me how you study first, right? Tell me where you're coming from. Tell me what you're doing and how you're doing that. And then we could try to figure out, and we could try to figure out and develop a few strategies that you might be worth trying. And then I will say, why don't you do that? And then come back to me and tell me, does that work? Because I don't promise to fix everything. You have your own background that I need to incorporate into everything that we're doing and all the conversations we're having. If a student is working full time, right? If they have problem being able to sit and read through a chapter, then we can work out how do you actually find and carve out half an hour here, half an hour there to actually become a productive individual who's productive in studying, excuse me, right? Go ahead with another one, please. Okay, so the student easily connects with peers and instructors, but has difficulty applying themselves and dedicating the time necessary to study and complete exams. I have a student right now who is, she has a very specific condition that inspired her to want to go into medical school. And she's been super excited. She's an advocate for the condition. She goes out and she does all these things to advocate for treatment of this condition. She's failing every class she has. And I'm her advisor as well. And we have sat down and multiple times, like maybe you can help in lots of different ways, right? But you have to become honest with yourself about what it is that you're really good at and what it is that you're truly trying to do. And how do you reframe that? Because one of the things that I see is that students come in, right, when they want to be, like all the ER doctors or Grey's Anatomy doctors that they see. And as they start taking the classes, might realize I don't actually enjoy the material, but I want to be able to help in so many other ways. So that's coming to sort of to reckon with your own ideas of self-worth and these ideas of what you are meant to do or what is your purpose and how do you make that work with all these expectations that you put on yourself, right? That's a certain bias that each student is coming in with, and our job is to help them recognize that a change of course sometimes is not failure, right? Because that's what they're sort of, they hung on to this dream and that one vision that they might have had for the rest of their life, that that's what they're going to do. And all of a sudden they realize they're not making it. And that they might not be able to, not because they don't have the intellectual capacity, but because their interest and passion is just not there. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Anya. Oh, they're in red too. Look at
Yeah,
that.
sorry. Yes. And these turn red. There we go. Good
Okay,
timing.
so let's talk about relationship and the tools that we use there. So this is when a person is reacting to the person delivering the message. So not the message itself, but the person who's actually delivering it. In our scenario, it's probably you. So they are shaped by what they feel about you as the deliverer of the message. So they might say that person doesn't know what they're talking about. That person doesn't like me. That person's a bully. You've talked about some of these things before. So we use a framework called TORC, which is essentially an acronym of establishing trust, being optimistic, being respectful, being intentional, and being caring. And I really like how Anya described the last case. That is a really difficult conversation. And just in how she described it, she talked about all 5 of these things as she approached that student. So that was a really good example. When we are trying to establish trust, we basically aren't just honest. We want to be dependable and believable. Being optimistic is really what it says. I mean, the student in Anya's case might feel like they're never going to make it. We need to be optimistic, but we also need to be realistic. And I think there can be a lot of optimism and realism. I actually just worked with a student recently who failed out of PA school, and it was a very sweet moment actually. And they're, they understood what happened and they know how to move forward in life. And that again, I was trying to help that person refine their mojo. Um, Being respectful is also it also means being trustworthy, in my opinion. Those things go hand in hand. And people will respect you when you give them honest feedback. When you're nice about it isn't the word, but when you're genuine, there we go. When you're genuine about how you give that feedback, they will respect you. Intentional means acting with purpose, and then care is actually caring. Do you really care about your students? So we have a few ways of looking at some of these cases. Anya, you want to talk about this first one?
Sure. So, for example, you have a student that needs to retake the course, right? And so for us, I'm in a very small institution, and there's only 2 faculty, myself and my colleague, who teach anatomy and physiology lecture, for example. So if they failed, they're coming back to me or to this other faculty member. So that already comes in with a sort of right, they might be embarrassed, they might not feel comfortable, and there's already sort of this fear of failure again, because now so much is riding on this ability to retake the course. And having establishing your relationship with them. So if it's a student that I might have had in class when they have failed, we've had conversations most often prior to them dropping the course. And during that time, I spent a lot of time talking about the fact that the failure is not the end, right? I spent a lot of time talking about where I actually go through and we have this, I do this exercise with them. What happens if you fail? Right? And then they'll tell me, well, I have to retake the class. And then I might not be, if I don't pass, I'm out of the program. And then, right? And I take them through all the way through, and then, until we come to the end. I'm like, okay, if we have to retake the class, then you're behind 1 year. You didn't fail. You could still become who you want to be, right? If you fail the class multiple times and you're done, then do you die? Is the world over? Do other opportunities open up? They do. And somehow being able to vocalize sometimes these fears and doing that with me, I think, right, with whom they assume has these amazingly high expectations of themselves, I think it becomes less scary. And then we talk about all the wonders that you have of when you fall, you have an opportunity to look at the world from a very different perspective. Right? It's an opportunity to try again. And that's what this is about. It's a strategy and making them comfortable with failure as an opportunity for growth as opposed to a question a question of their character and abilities is a really important thing. In fact, when they sign a contract for me, they read the syllabus and they sign a contract that in the end of there's a statement that I have read the syllabus. I'm willing to put in my full effort, and I recognize that my effort is not a reflection of my intelligence, right? And I have them sign that, and I come back to that because I spend a lot of time talking about the fact that their grades are almost a reflection of strategy. How they take their exams, it's about strategy. It's not, if they didn't do well, we talk about study strategies. We don't talk about intellectual capacity. And we do this on a regular basis. Go ahead. Sorry. Another one. Okay. And so this sort of is this case, right? Is allows anxiety of failure to override learning of material. And so much of that is also about the truth, right? How the students see themselves and what they assume success is about. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. And in my lectures, throughout my lectures, I always incorporate this concept of failure, strategy. We talk about you're going to have an exam. How are you going to take this exam? How are you going to look at the questions? And I start off with even as simple as you're going to start the exam, and before you open the page, you're going to take 3 deep breaths, and you're going to count till 4. You're going to hold for 4, and we practice this. And so I teach them how to think about exams, how to think about their failure, all of those as you're not just here to learn anatomy, but you're here to learn how to deal with stress. And I think all of that sort of helps build a relationships where I'm not just an instructor who cares about them learning anatomy, but I'm somebody who cares about them as individuals and understanding their individual goals. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. All right, and then our final tool is identity. And essentially, as I mentioned before, I spend the most time as a mentor and a coach on this tool. Helping, and Anya and Lauren both mentioned this, helping your students believe in themselves. No matter what they've been through, they are where they're at for a reason that somehow they got themselves there, and we need to help them believe that they belong. I had a conversation with a student not too long ago who was having an existential crisis. And I said to them, I'm going to say something that's going to shock you, but hopefully it'll help you. And you need to realize that the imposter syndrome never gets better. It always gets worse. So how do you navigate through that? You navigate it through by learning how to deal with uncertainty. You navigate it by learning to believe in yourself and that you belong here. And we're here to help you with that. That was actually really helpful for her to put it in that perspective. Okay, so we're really talking about growth and fixed mindsets. So you've all heard probably about growth and fixed mindsets. Growth mindsets are mindsets where people are open to the influence of improving and working through what is necessary to get to that point. A fixed mindset is somebody, again, who's really more in the defensive, really more in the system one. They don't want to lose. I'm not saying that there aren't good reasons to be in a fixed mindset. There, if you're in a reactive situation, if you're an EMT and you've got to react, you have to be in a fixed mindset, right? There's no time for you to say, this person's bleeding. How do I do this? No, you got to get to a point where you've trained your fixed mindset with your growth mindset. So helping them believe in themselves is really helpful. So what are the benefits? They perform better. They build resiliency, grit, perseverance. They learn how to work in teams. They learn how to self-care. And that brings us to our last cases. Anya? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Go ahead and click on through these, please.
Sure. There you go. Oh, one more.
So the reason you see a lot of these come up is that, remember in the beginning I said that these are not mutually exclusive cases. And I think for a lot of our students, when they're coming in and a lot of my students, if they're not if they're not, let's say, going into biology majors with the intent of going to medical school, they're OT majors, I am a barrier to their path. Right? And they're coming in and they're thinking, they're not science people, right? And so therefore, they're not going to be good at this. This is a fixed mindset. The idea that they are not good in science, they're coming in with this preconceived notion of what somebody who's good at science is like. And if they have to exert effort and they have to suffer, then that automatically puts them at a disadvantage because then clearly they're not meant to be in this field. And my goal, and I think my job from the get-go, is to set that, hold on a second, none of this is intuitive. No one wakes up knowing this material, and putting in time and effort, and just because something is hard, it does not mean that you can't do this or you shouldn't be doing this. And I have to remind them on a regular basis, and I have to remind them that failure is part of growth, and that we're going to have to go through this, and we're going to make these mistakes together. And I remind them and I tell them that I make mistakes. On the first day of class, I have this list. I put up a slide of expectations because I say that for any relationships, it's very important to know what the expectations are. So I tell you what I expect of you, and I also will tell you what you can expect of me. And I will tell them in that list of expectations that I will make mistakes. You can expect, I guarantee that I will make mistakes. But I will also promise that I will fix them and that you will ask me questions that I know nothing about. But I will learn and I will find the answers for you, which to me signifies that we all can do that. I'm not anything special. I know something very specific. Maybe I know a few more things than they do, but that's about it. So I think exactly we get better. And one of the things that I try very hard is to be honest with them and to also show vulnerability and show them where my weaknesses lie and that they are teaching me as I'm teaching them. And so I think part of this process is also helping establish that every person who comes into the class has something to contribute, and whether that is a student or faculty, and that we learn together as we go through this process. And I think that helps them navigate a little bit easier, knowing that we're all suffering and we're all struggling, but through that struggle and suffering, we get better and they get better. And that's also where an opportunity to show that is I say that if you take an exam and you come in and you look at your exam and you see what you have done, right? And you see the kind of mistakes you've done. So we analyze by the type of mistakes you have made, like, and why you made those mistakes. Now we can talk about how do you change the strategies of studying and taking an exam so that you do better the next time. And we go every time, it becomes this iterative process that everything you do, you're not simply looking at an exam grade, but you're looking at what did you not understand? How did you study incorrectly? How do you take what you are and what you're all the fears that you have, and how do you translate that into actual practical strategies to help you do better the next time? And I think that allows them to face the truth, right? This idea of what they can and cannot do also allows them to take ownership of their studying and recognize that they can change things. that they don't have this set and fixed abilities, but rather they can grow. And then behind them, there's me who's constantly cheering for them and who's there to support them and also be honest with them. And it's sort of John, you were talking about Brene Brown, and one of Brene Brown books talks about that honest is kind. And I think that is the really important sort of philosophy, not philosophy, but sort of way to communicate with your students, right? You could all being honest with them and sort of allowing them to see where you see them and how you see them in the positive light, and that you see their potential. There's a kindness to that that is really important, that I think creates this foundation of support that students feel, because you create that through your classroom and you create that through one-on-one interactions with them. Yeah.
Thank you, Anya. So we just wanted to show you our students that we love very much. And then Lauren, I didn't ask you to do this earlier, but since you started us off with, so these are Anya's students, these are Lauren's students, these are my students. But I thought it would be really cool for you to bookend our conversation by sharing any stories that have come out of helping students feel heard from the survey that you gave them. So I wonder if you could close us out with anything that you might want to share.
I think not just with the survey, I think with the survey, I've had students express concerns or, oh, I didn't know you realized that I had a pet, because they wrote about that in their fun fact. Or what I do after I read them is I put it in the chat, but a couple things is the next class I go in and I say, I pick out highlighted points and I say, do these things sound familiar from what you wrote in your surveys? And honestly, I don't have to change it every semester. It's the same thing every semester. I have my list and I review it, and maybe I'll add a few things. And they then feel heard, and then we go through some of those things, and then they go, oh, okay. Or sometimes if, their pronouns, may be different from how they may be presenting, right? Have that noted and then talk to them and say, listen, like kind of one-on-one conversation, or I've talked about it in class, depending on the topic. And I've had some that come and say, thank you, just one-on-one after class, just say, thank you, I feel seen, right? And it doesn't have to be a lot, but you acknowledge, a pet, you acknowledge pronouns, you acknowledge, a family situation. Oh, you have a twin, or whatever it might be. And a lot of times it is the fun facts at first to break that ice. And then you can go in to say, all right, you wrote that you have an IEP, you wrote that you have these things, and sort of bridge that gap. And so I usually break that ice coming back to them one-on-one with their fun facts. But I do read them, the first day and pull out these things, but I read them about 2 or 3 weeks later. After I know who the student, have a more of a connection with the student and a face with a name, and go, all right, now let me read them again when I have a little bit more personality behind them and say, okay, how can I target this and work with them? So it's not just reading them the first day, it's reading them a couple weeks in to review that prior to an exam, prior to whatever, because that first day we're all learning. So I do read them again.
That's fantastic. Thank you. We want to be mindful of your time. For those of you who would like to stick around for questions, I can stick around for 5 minutes. But again, this was meant to be a tip sheet for things that you can think about in your feedback. If there's anything specific you want to really dive into, we may consider submitting a workshop for the HAPS conference. So please let us know if you'd like to learn more about anything. There's so many different directions to take this presentation, and so we would love to work with you more. I'm happy to stick around, but for those of you who need to get going, thank you so much. And it was wonderful having you here. And I'm going to stop the recording so that if anybody wants to talk, they don't have to be recorded.